All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. I hope you had a wonderful spring break. Normally, I would say that I hope that you had a restful spring break, but I'm a parent of a 2-year-old, and I'm realizing that there are sort of new terms that have to be applied to vacations. And restful is probably not the most appropriate one when you are going on a trip with lots of children. So I'm going to come up with some new ways of describing what a vacation can be. Perhaps some of you all can give me some insight into this. But my vacation was wonderful. Restful it was not, but a great time with family. But good to be back at school. We obviously have a really important push here now to the end of the school year. I'll share something that I said to my seniors yesterday. This is such an important window of time for them, right? These are their final sort of 30 days at school. And I think of this stretch as one of the most important and formative ones in their education, in part because they are so sort of vulnerable in this moment, but in the very best way. I find that seniors especially are sort of open to conversation, open to relationship, open to each other in this last month of school, in a way that's difficult to achieve at previous sort of moments in their education. In part because I think their barriers are down, right? They're sort of anticipating the next step in their education. They're not trying to perform for their classmates. And so they are able to kind of engage in real and human conversations in a new and really beautiful way. So many of the most moving moments that I've had in my time at Atlanta Classical has been with seniors in this final month of time. In general, one of the things that we talk to our faculty about in regard to fourth quarter especially is that we have this responsibility to kind of take a storytelling role relative to our students. I think this is in general a responsibility of our teachers especially, that we come alongside of our students and help narrate back to them the story of their year. You all probably know from experience that it can be really difficult to tell your own story accurately, right? To remember what all happened to you, how you grew rather, where you might have regressed, where you might have struggled, and to kind of piece that together into coherent narrative of a year, right? This is difficult to do on one's own. And so a teacher then is uniquely positioned to come alongside of a student and say, let me tell you the story of your year at Atlanta Classical. Let me narrate to you out loud where you were at the start of the year and how far you've come. So this is sort of our position as teachers, as administrators, as faculty, staff members at ACA in this last month. We really want to take up and embrace this role of storytelling. And we think it's one of the most important things that we do. Let me share my screen here, though, and get into today's presentation. So we're going to be covering a few things. Our curricular highlight is going to come from the fourth grade and Mr. Barfield in particular. I'm going to talk a little bit about the senior thesis and actually begin there. And then you all are going to hear from our new community engagement manager, Mrs. Rebecca Coons, who has been with the school for a very long time, is a familiar face, but she's going to describe some of the work that she'll be doing moving forward for ACA. So a couple just highlights from the last couple of weeks. Our seniors, actually last year was the very first year, have begun an annual trip to Italy. Last year's group went to Florence. They did a couple day trips from there. This year's group went to Sicily. They worked through an organization called Ed Odyssey that runs trips for a variety of local independent schools. There's a gentleman named Stefano who's been leading international trips for decades, used to work at the university level, sort of managing exchange students. But he lives in Rome. He's sort of our local representative. I've and some parents sort of worked alongside of him to generate an itinerary for our students, and they spent 7 or 8 days on the island of Sicily, in Syracuse, and in the surrounding area. It was a fabulous time, as you can imagine. Mr. Holt and Mrs. Holt were the two chaperones for this trip. And one thing that's just worth sharing with all of you, and Stefano made the same comment about our students last year. He said that in 2 decades of doing this work with college students, with high school students, with adults, he has never had a group that was as attentive, as respectful, and as enjoyable to be around as the students from Atlanta Classical. He's actually trying to figure out how to send his son as an exchange student from Italy to ACA. I don't know if that is possible with how wait lists work, but perhaps we'll work through this with APS or something. But I think such a gratifying thing to hear that our students make such a positive impression elsewhere. One of the sort of aims of our virtues, of our mission at Atlanta Classical, is to create people that we like to be with, right? That our students would be the kind of young adults that are a joy to encounter in the world, that are conversational, that are generous, that are empathetic. And I think this is a little proof positive that it's happening. So it was a delightful trip. Certainly go and ask Mr. Garrett Holt, Mrs. Haley Holt about what the experience was like. Ask for pictures. These are all from them. But it sounds like this was really a highlight of the second semester for this group that went to Sicily. I also want to talk a little bit about our senior thesis presentation. So an email went out in the last 24 hours or so about these defenses that are going to run starting today through May 2nd. You all have likely heard about this project. I think this is arguably the most important and the best thing that we do at Atlanta Classical. The students begin to work on these papers in the mid-fall of their senior year. They are assigned an advisor who works with them individually to kind of generate a question that emerged from a curricular text that they've encountered at some point in their education at ACA, that then grows, expands into a 12 to 15 page paper that they defend for about 50 minutes in front of a panel of faculty members who have read the paper and are prepared to ask them questions, and then all of you, right? Friends, family, and just community members. All of these presentations are going to be live streamed, and they're also all open to the public. So Dr. KT is actually running the project this year. We've published our schedule, and so if you're interested in attending one of these, certainly you can do that through the Zoom link that we're providing. We would love to have you in person if you are able. This is the moment where the senior goes from being a student to really being a teacher, right? The student makes this really critical turn in this moment where they face their classmates, where they sit across from their teachers, and they engage in dialogue about a really important text and offer their unique reading, right? Oftentimes this classical education, the liberal arts education, is described as a great conversation. And this is the moment at which the student really begins to participate in it. And the way that this tradition that we adhere to at Atlanta Classical is perpetuated is through this, right? Is students realizing that they have their own unique insights, their own angle that they can sort of take in adding to a conversation about a really important text, whether that's Herodotus or Hamlet or Zora Neale Hurston, whatever it might be. We would love to have you all join us for one of these presentations. I think it's always sort of affirming to students to see folks, even that they don't know, in the audience, to know that the whole community wants to rally around them for this project, and to kind of assert to them and to certify even that this is the culmination of an education at Atlanta Classical, that you can take an idea that you've been wrestling with for a long time, you can work it out through various primary texts, and then at the end offer your own commentary on the question, on the problem that you're wrestling with. The seniors in preparation for this actually made little teaser videos, and I want to share one of these with all of you. This is from Elizabeth Richter. I don't know the exact date of her presentation. You can go to Mrs. Kuhn's email that went out recently and check the schedule. But I just want to give you a little preview of one of the topics, Elizabeth's, that you can hear her argue about in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to share this video. I've historically struggled with sharing videos, but I tested this one in advance. So it should be that this one works. I'm going to let it buffer just for a second, and then you all can enjoy a quick summary of Elizabeth Richter's senior thesis, which is called Escaping the Void, the Role of Objectivity in a Good Life. All right. So again, I'm just going to let this buffer forward because I really do want for y'all to be able to hear this. And if someone would maybe text me in the event that you can't hear it, that would be great. But I'm going to start this. Hopefully you can hear it. Oh.
Hello, my name. The only difference It's like when men. Hello, my name is Elizabeth Richter, and my senior thesis is titled Escaping the Void, the Role of Objectivity in a Good Life. As with most people, I personally want to live a good life, one that's meaningful and fulfilling. But how do I actually do this? What things do I need to do? What beliefs should I have in order to live well? One thing that's impacted my life a lot so far has been my Christian faith. It influences the things I believe in, and it impacts the decisions that I make. And I believe that it helps me live a better life. But why is this the case? In order to explore this, I often have conversations with my close friends and family, and we continue to return to the themes of not only objectivity, but also freedom. And this led me to wonder, is freedom alone enough for a good life? Or do men need something that's external to themselves, some objective standard, such as a religion, upon which to base their freedom? To explore this, I looked at several books. The first being The Humanism of Existentialism by Jean-Paul Sartre. And he argues for the philosophy of atheistic existentialism, in which nothing has meaning except for the subjective meaning that each individual gives to it. So there's no set notions or set concepts for anything. Everything's meaningless except for the meaning that each individual gives. So this is really a life of complete freedom because there's nothing set beforehand. So if freedom really were the only defining factor of a good life, then someone who lived a subjective life could live a really good life. But in analyzing the character of Meursault in Albert Camus' The Stranger, I was not satisfied with this life. He led a life that was full of subjective meaning, but it didn't seem that he lived a good life. He actually murdered someone, and he believed that that was okay for him to do because it abided by his subjective standards. So I turned to the philosophy of objectivism. I looked at C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man and the character of Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus exemplifies the belief in objectivism. He believed that there's a truth and there's goodness that is beyond himself, that's unarguably true and beautiful, despite what he may think, despite what someone else may think, that it remains true external to man. And he fought for that in defending Tom Robinson. This way of life seems much more meaningful to me. It allows man to build his life upon a standard beyond himself. It's like when men walk, they don't just walk on their feet, they walk on the ground beneath them. And this objective standard is the ground. It gives life true meaning because it's that firm foundation upon which lives are built.
All right. So really a beautiful job by Elizabeth there on her presentation. And I think a little window into the kind of topics that our students are exploring. Perhaps the most important takeaway here is they're taking on ideas, problems, questions that are going to directly influence the way that they conduct themselves as young people in college and as adults moving forward in the world, right? What could be a more important question than thinking carefully about whether or not there is such a thing as objective truth and how that ought to alter the way that you think about your relationships with other people and the way that you make your way through the world, right? Elizabeth is wrestling with such an essential question of, is my own subjective interpretation of reality the only true thing? And should I be sort of defined by that? Or should I be sensitive, attentive to the possibility that there is an objective standard for moral conduct, a best way to live that I ought to kind of subject myself to? Such an important tension for every single person to work out. And I'm really grateful that the senior thesis process gave Elizabeth that occasion. If that presentation wasn't sort of persuasive enough, I'll make yet another appeal. Please do come to some of these senior thesis presentations. They're always thrilling and they're always very joyful when we applaud the students at the end of their talk. All right, a couple quick things that I want to announce. So April 15th is our first ever Wonderfest, led by our science faculty at Atlanta Classical. Our upper school students are going to be putting this on for our lower school students. There will be activities like making ice cream using microscopes. Well, those are two separate things. Okay, we're not making ice cream literally using microscopes, but making ice cream, pause, using microscopes, making straw rockets, etc. This is going to be a ton of fun. I hope that you'll put this on your calendar and prioritize being there. Our faculty have worked really hard to put this together, and our students are excited to receive the lower school students and to guide them through some science experiments. All right, a couple other things coming up in the next month or so. On April 19th, we have 2 calls with our academic leadership. Mr. Hahn is going to be leading a call with all rising 6th grade students, and also those students that are joining us who are coming in from other schools. On April 19th, again at 7 p.m., you'll hear from Mr. Holt. You'll hear from other 6th grade teachers and from Mr. Hahn as sort of a preview of what to expect from 6th grade. There's going to be an additional presentation that happens during open house in the fall, but we wanted to sort of give all of our parents some perspective on what the critical points of transition are as a student matriculates into the 6th grade, which is, as you all know, a transitional year, right? Students begin to get their own lockers. Students get to participate in the house system. Students, instead of having one homeroom teacher, now have 3. It's sort of a middle ground between lower school and upper school. They're still part of the lower school by our definition, and that's actually an important clarification and one that Mr. Hahn will get into. But certainly if you have a rising 6th grader, we encourage you to attend this. Similarly, Mr. Sheps is going to be running a call for our rising 7th grade students at 7:30 p.m. on that same evening, where he'll be just forecasting what moving from 6th to 7th grade entails. Finally, on April 28th, we're going to have a coffee here at Atlanta Classical that Mr. Sheps, myself, and Mr. Flynn are going to run from 8 to 9 a.m. For those of you who have students that are going to be in our high school for the very first time, we're going to be talking a little bit about our high school curriculum, talking about graduation requirements, course sequencing, and also talking about some of the unique values and I think advantages of being a high school student at Atlanta Classical, to include access to a really incredible college advising team. Mr. Flynn mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but one of the new roles that we're actually introducing next year at Atlanta Classical is a college advising writing instructor. We're noticing that in the college application process, as many universities are moving away from standardized tests, they are emphasizing the essay components of an application much more, right? So the personal statement and then the many kind of individual questions that a student might need to answer. And so we're actually hiring someone that will work focused exclusively on these personal statements and on the many sort of essays that a student has to generate. And we've got a really excellent person that we're going to be bringing on board that we'll make an announcement about soon. So please do mark your calendars if you've got a rising 6th, 7th, or 9th grade student, April 19th or April 28th. All right, quickly, 4th grade highlight. So Mr. Barfield passed these along. I will say about Mr. Barfield, he is so thoughtful and careful about the education that he is offering to our 4th grade students. Every time I sit down with him to talk, I'm always impressed by how he is really thoughtfully merging both the academic and sort of the virtue components of our education. And he can tell you in any text that he's reading, or even really any unit in math that he might be teaching, for instance, how it builds a particular virtue and what sort of the theme of that unit is. So he explained that right now, and they're finishing up Anne of Green Gables, one of his favorite books, and their emphasis has been on how you deal with failure, right? How do you overcome the troubles of your life? My mom, when I was a little boy, bought for me a poster of Winston Churchill's face and then a quote from him, which says that success is going from one failure to the next with no loss of enthusiasm. Anyway, I think that the 4th grade students are sort of working through this same idea, but through Anne of Green Gables. In math, 4th grade is a unique thing, in part because instead of just sort of learning new concepts that are sort of discrete and disconnected, they are really beginning to merge ideas, right? They are taking the accumulation of knowledge that they've generated over the last 4 years of their education and beginning to see how they intersect, which can be a challenge. Again, one of Mr. Barfield and Mr. Highskill's, I think, unique strengths as teachers is their patience and the way that they encourage students to have a growth mindset, right? To see failure not as an obstacle, not as a condemnation, but as a sign of growth, as a sign that you're being challenged and you have an opportunity to improve. That is such an important transition. There's actually, many of you probably know this, there's been a lot of good thinking done over the last decade about the importance of growth mindset, particularly in the domain of math, where students who just identify themselves as, not being math students, for instance, really have worse outcomes that are underperforming their intelligence, and that a student who can simply, reframe their struggle from like, well, I'm incapable of doing this, to no, this means I'm really being pushed and I have an opportunity for growth, dramatically outperform their peers of similar intelligence levels, but who are willing to say, I'm not a math person and I'm giving this up. So I love the way that Mr. Barfield kind of navigates this, and Mr. High School as well. Finally, in history, they're doing a deep dive in the fourth grade into the American Revolution, and emphasizing kind of what a beautiful thing human beings can create if they are willing to come together and unite behind a common ideal. So, love the work that our fourth grade students are doing, and really proud of the men who are leading this work, Mr. High School and Mr. Barfield. All right. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to the newest member of our team, Miss Rebecca Coons, who is our new community engagement manager. We're so lucky and grateful to have her on our team. I'm going to let her describe what her work is and close out this call. So, Ms. Coons, if you'd like to unmute, I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Andrew. Hello, ACA community. It is an honor to be on this call with you. Like Mr. Andrews said, my name is Rebecca Coons, and I've been a part of the ACA community for 6 years now in many different capacities. And most recently, I have taken on the role of community engagement manager as of last month, actually. And I have hit the ground running. It has been an incredible transition. I cannot thank the ACA leadership enough for just helping this transition be so smooth. It's been incredible to work with teachers and volunteers and staff here at ACA. And to me, that's the sweet spot of this role, is that I get to work with everyone at the school, including you, the parents. And so that's really what I want to focus on today, is how this role could be a resource to you as parents, and how we can partner in making ACA communication and community even stronger than it is currently right now. So I'm going to just share briefly two major responsibilities of this role. And thank you, Mr. Andrew, for changing my slide here in a second. But the first responsibility of this role is communication, both internal communication, which is what I'm going to focus on today in this call, and external communication within our community. But with internal communication, many of you have been receiving our ACA communication all year in the form of our weekly Legenda, which is our kind of our weekly calendar of events, updates from all departments of our school. You've probably also read the Chronicle, which is our monthly newsletter, for lack of a better word, but it gives a little snapshot into stories that have happened throughout the month. It literally chronicles the month of the school, and different spotlights that we like to take on the upper school, lower school, and within our staff. And also social media, which we're excited to ramp up the end of this year and into next year. We also communicate to you through all school emails, which usually that's helping a teacher tell a story about their particular responsibility in the classroom, or an event that they're hosting, or an event the PTCA is hosting. And so that comes from this department as well. Parent Square is another new communication that we've launched this year that we're excited to relaunch next year, and with some more parameters in place around it, but I'll get to that in a second. But that's an app that has been particularly this year used by our teachers to communicate with our parents. And like I said, we're excited to re-roll that out. Mr. Andrew, if you don't mind changing to the next slide. So the second big piece of this role is community engagement. And this role is the school liaison to the PTCA and to the parents. So any event that happens through the school is typically run by an army of volunteers through the PTCA. That's the auction, Screen on the Green, any used uniform sales, you name it, what is hosted by the school is run by parents. And so even our Legenda, I mean, we have 2 incredible volunteers every week that collect information and put it in our Legenda for our parents to see. So we are truly run by volunteers, and it's a privilege to be able to be that middleman between our hardworking parents and the school, and making sure our parent volunteers have what they need to be able to execute with excellence. So we also have an incredible volunteer coordinator. Shout out to Katie Goodwin. You will be hearing from her at the end of this year, as she is going to be sitting out a volunteer coordinator survey for next year. We would love to utilize you, our parents who are talented and have many gifts, and plug you in different parts of the school, including communications. If you have a graphic design background, an editing background, we need all kinds of hands and feet to make this place run smoothly. And I'm just going to wrap up my section here with the communication survey. You all responded beautifully to our 2022-2023 school year communication survey. And I can say with confidence that I have read every single comment that you all submitted through our open-ended questions, and have taken them to heart. I've passed them on to leadership. We're currently crafting a thoughtful plan for communication for next year, and utilizing so many of your excellent ideas that you presented in that survey. This is just a quick snapshot. There's a lot of takeaways from the survey. This is just one in particular that I wanted to share with you. You as parents said that you were overall satisfied with our communications here at ACA, but definitely had ways that we could grow and improve. And like I said, we're thrilled to receive that feedback. And just a few bullet points here that we will be implementing next year and are working through what that looks like. But you suggested streamline the Legenda distribution process. Also, you suggested let's strategically use our communication channels, specifically Parent Square. We're going to be rolling out a How We Communicate document to educate parents on exactly where to go for what within all of our communication channels. And then you also were thoughtful in sharing that we needed a communication process for all of our extracurricular activities, which we are definitely talking about as a leadership team, and talking about just internally on the best way to keep you informed as parents on everything that's going on at the school for your child, both in the classroom and out. So please reach out to me with any questions. I am an open door policy. I would love to be able to help you, support you, and grow ACA community together.
All right. Thanks very much, Mrs. Coons. And thanks to all of you for joining this morning. I will see y'all next week. Have a wonderful week.